You're watching the Kop TV, the voice of football's most famous stand.
Salah to settle it! In front of the Kop!
Peter Moore, thanks so much for joining us today in the beautiful Municipal Hotel in the incredible city of Liverpool.
Yep.
Welcome to the Kop TV.
My pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Always great to be back.
Right, Peter Moore, the Scouser in Cali, also known as that. I'm sure you're proud of that title. You should maybe get that trademarked. You've had and are still having a glittering career in both the corporate world with Sega, Reebok, Microsoft, EA, Wrexham, the founder of Santa Barbara Sky as well, and more, of course. But what I wanted to focus on was on the 27th of February 2017, you get a phone call. Tell me, what were you doing on the day that you found out that you were going to become the CEO of not just any club, but your beloved club, a place where you've been coming since the late many decades ago? Yeah. I'm sure you won't mind me saying.
Well, the 27th of February was actually I'd already agreed months prior to that. And we'd agreed that I would leave EA in April. And so that Ian, my predecessor, was going to move on at the end of the season. So there was going to be a smooth transition. Ian, to his credit, had given his notice a year in advance and said, look, this is my final year. I think it was his 10th season in charge. He was going to go and do other things. And so that gave FSG a year to do a search for his successor, which ended up obviously being me. But from the perspective of we were trying to keep this thing into a very smooth transition, I was at EA and a full-time employee of EA, had not told anybody. But I got a phone call that morning, very early in the morning, because the West Coast is 8 hours behind, obviously, and it was Mike Gordon, my boss, or to be my boss, said, unfortunately, the newspapers have got wind of you, and they're going to go live with the story tonight, your time, and long story short, I was a Section 16 officer of EA, a publicly traded company. We would have to respond to this, either deny, which would have been a lie, or confirm. If you confirm, then you have to file with Wall Street, with the SEC, that a Section 16 officer is leaving. So it's more info than you probably want or need, but that was a difficult day. And so I had to call the CEO of EA, my boss at the time, and tell him I was leaving. And so we could do all of the necessary announcements and paperwork within the next 5 hours, because this newspaper, which shall not be named around these parts, was absolutely hell-bent on announcing me.
So you mentioned, a few months before this has already been sorted or sorting at the time. The initial inquiry to ask for your services, does it make you think back to when you first came to Anfield and how proud must you have been? Because this is, again, I've listed all the companies you've worked for, but this must have surely meant the most.
Well, yeah, I mean, I thought, and you mentioned Reebok, I was here in 1996 at Anfield announcing Reebok's deal to be the new kit manufacturer for Liverpool Football Club. And I thought at that moment, this will be the proudest part of my career. And that was with Peter Robinson, who recently passed away, and it was, everything goes through your mind. My dad taking me to my first game in 1959. My dad's been gone a long time. But how proud he would have been of his son. And it was by far the only job that I would ever consider coming back to the UK for. Executive recruiter called me, it's actually in the late summer of 2016. So
that's the initial call.
That was the initial contact of, would you ever consider moving back to the UK? Heck no. What if it was to be CEO of Liverpool Football Club? And thus then started several months of back and two, because it was complex. I was I was very well established at EA. Without getting into a lot of detail, I had to walk away from a lot of money that was vested money, having been there for 10 years. When you work in Silicon Valley, most of your comp is based on equity, and so you build up that equity over a long period of time. And that's kind of what they call golden handcuffs. It makes it very difficult for you to leave, but this would be the one job that I would walk away from all of that money that was vested, and come back to the city of my birth.
Absolutely, and what a city it is. I've been living here myself for 2.5 years. My parents, my mum especially, is from here, and there is a very special feeling. And obviously my accent, a lot of people say, what are you doing supporting Liverpool, and why do you live there? But you know more than anyone how great this city is, and when it comes to football,
absolutely,
you know, it's exceptional.
Well, it's a cosmopolitan city. It's history. You know, this was the gateway to Europe, particularly from the United States, and with the late 1800s, and we're a melting pot, and we take great pride in our diversity here. And you look around, you walk around the streets, and you look at people, and you talk to people, and everybody's got a story. And if they've been here long enough, they can point back to 5-6 generations of coming here. A lot of people were coming to Europe, got off at Liverpool, and never left Liverpool. I mean, so that always has been part of this city's color and context and vibrancy. Diversity, equality, and inclusion has been something that we take great pride on.
So at what point, once you'd actually settled into the role of being CEO of Liverpool Football Club, at what point did you think, I think we might be on the brink of massive success both on and off the pitch? At what point did you think, wow, we could be on the start of something special?
Yeah, I think that as a fan, obviously I was keeping very close eyes on, and once I knew I was coming, incredibly close eyes on what was going on, primarily off the pitch. I've been very involved with the club in my days at EA, and in fact, I was actually over here at the invitation of Liverpool Football Club the day that Jurgen was introduced to the press, and I went to the game at Spurs the next day, completely unrelated to me actually becoming CEO. I was moderating a panel of sponsors in London that, and I could feel the energy then of people that could see something, particularly with Jurgen's focus on building a squad that would compete not only here in England, but in Europe, as per the old days. And so I met Jurgen that day, shook his hand. There'd been no contact at that point from Fenway Sports Group for me, and I went back to my job at EA. So I'd always been involved with the club, both personally and professionally, for a little while here. But the first 100 days, when you take a senior role, you do a 100-day plan in which you listen, you figure out what it is that needs to happen around here. I can tell you I didn't really have a job description, because when I arrived, my role as CEO is very different than my predecessor's role, who was very involved in signing players and being involved in the transfer market. And this was the time when Michael Edwards, as sporting director, was starting to grow, and his team, Barry Hunter, Dave Fallows, a great team, starting to grow into their own entity, if you will, within the club, that they were going to manage this. And I was perfectly fine with that. There was enough to do as a more traditional CEO of American sports sense. There was enough to do off the pitch for me. And in the end, as I look back, it was really 4 things I focused on. Community, very much both local and global. I coined a phrase, local heart, global pulse, which is who we are and what we are. Civic, figuring out here how we operate within the city and Greater Merseyside, and building relationships with the Mayor's office, Joe Anderson at the time, a staunch Evertonian, Steve Rotherham, the Metro Mayor for infrastructure, at the time the Chief of Police, Andy Cook, and figuring out how civically, we fit into this. I built strong relationships with all of the kind of dignitaries in Liverpool, and became a little bit of a spokesperson for Liverpool because of my role. And so community, civic, commercial with Billy Hogan, you could sense that we were starting to drive towards being more of that global powerhouse that you knew we were. So bigger brands were more interested than they previously were in Liverpool. And we'd qualified for Champions League. We'd beaten Middlesbrough at Anfield, the last game of the previous season. So we were, I remember, I think we were in the qualifying rounds at Hoffenheim, you know.
Yeah.
So
Trent scored a free kick.
yeah, and I was there, and this was and we were even worried. It's funny to think back. We were worried because Hoffenheim, I don't think, had been beaten for 25 games, and I'm hoping we get through this. And obviously we went all the way to the final. But from the perspective of figuring that out, so it was for me, it was community, it was civic, it was commercial. Standard Chartered, brilliant, and one of the great things that I always took pride in, and the club takes pride in, we've only really had 2 shirt sponsors in 30 years, Carlsberg and Standard Chartered. And at that time, Western Union had come on the sleeve. We were starting to build the relationships with other brands. Bet Victor was the training gear. We started then, of course, to look elsewhere, and AXA, who have been superb with Liverpool. So these top quality global brands were coming on board. And then culture, finally. Here in Liverpool, and Chapel Street offices not far from where we're sat right here, there's 800 people work for Liverpool Football Club that don't kick a ball. And my job, I felt, was to coalesce them around a strategy and a vision, objectives of what we needed to do, be very visible, and also to create the culture of the Liverpool way again, and so rather controversially, I got very engaged with the fans, locally and globally. And I say controversially, utilizing social media, which I did some silly things, but also fans, I think, recognized they needed some engagement. Our owners live in Boston, Massachusetts for the most part, or Los Angeles, California, and would come over here, but not regularly enough. So rightly or wrongly, I saw my role as to engage with a local fan base. And during the 3.5 years I was here, probably visited and spoke at 15 to 16 official Liverpool supporters clubs around the world. And would go in, whether I was there for a game, on business, or even a holiday, I would find the local OLSC, get with whoever the president of the OLSC was, and say, where do you meet? Let's get a group together. I'll make a presentation, have a couple of pints with everybody, and take questions. And I felt that was my role, and I was certainly capable of doing it, and I loved doing it. So from Hong Kong to Bangkok to Munich, I could go on, Cape Town, South Africa. I would, wherever I happened to be, I would go find the OLSC.
And that's the beauty of supporting a club like Liverpool. For example, in the summer, I found the one in Miami. I went there, and it was a Thursday afternoon. 16 of them are all there. I'm thinking, do you guys not have jobs? Or the support is crazy around the world. So going back to the success off the pitch, which obviously you were massively involved in. I remember a game against Tottenham. We lost 4-1 at Wembley. Yeah. Lovren had to be taken off at half time. It was a dark day. But after that, it was almost like a line was drawn in the sand. And I would say, and I hope you'd agree, that maybe that moment we had to go through that pain to get to, again, another painful Champions League final, but the success on the pitch started following from that day.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I remember it very well. In fact, it was, Billy Hogan and myself were there, and that was a rough day indeed. I mean, it was, Dejan had a very difficult time against Harry Kane during that period. It's, of course, embarrassing for a professional footballer to be pulled before half-time, but it was damage control. And it was also a bad night. And it's my own fault. We flew back. I think we fly out of Luton Airport, fly back, and a few hundred yards from here, I'm walking back in my club suit, right by where Riva is now, what used to be Gino De Campos, and I was with my assistant at that time, Zara Dyer, and a group of young lads who had clearly been on the ale for a few hours. Just one lad came up to me and he was obviously upset with what he had seen, and just punched me in the back of the head. Oh yeah, and lesson learned. Wow. A little bit. And I always remember that, just walking up towards Town Hall with Gino's on the right, and he was, we could tell straight away, it's always great to have a woman in that situation because they calm things down. Zara jumped in and Otherwise, it could have got a little bit. But he just came up, grabbed me, and then just smacked me in the back of the head. And
that defeat?
Yeah, I think just it was difficult to understand what he was actually saying. It was, because he was slurring, but he was clearly upset. Wow. And the classic soft lad came out, which classic Scouse expression. But yeah, that was the last time that I recall. Certainly I would never go out again in a club suit, never did. And even win or lose, I wouldn't go into town on a Saturday night type thing. It just wasn't worth it.
So the Premier League CEO of the year in 2019, again, this was a time when we'd won the Champions League. We were very close to winning the Premier League. There was massive success, as I've mentioned, both on and off the pitch. But I guess leading off the back of that question, how does someone cope with being in a job where there's not only so much pressure at maybe board level, but as you mentioned, you could bump into a fan. How do you cope with that pressure of being in such a high pressure job?
You have to embrace what the role is, which is, and my job was the business. It wasn't the football. It was the business of football. And the flip side for me, I had the benefit of being a Scouser, so I could understand what people were going through. The flip side of that is that probably at times I got too close to being a fan. And this was a discussion that ownership and I had when they were contemplating me for the role, is being a fan, being born and bred in Liverpool, as was my predecessor, Ian, is that a positive or a negative? And I believed it was a positive. Sometimes it was a negative. I would, get maybe what was described as unstatesmanlike. In other words, get too close to the fans. My job, I felt, was to engage with the fans, help them. I was very used to engaging with gamers in my previous role, and took EA through a very difficult period during the time when I was Chief Operating Officer by embracing and engaging with gamers and literally calming everybody down and being the human face of a faceless corporation that bizarrely was voted worst company in America whilst I was there for all kinds of ridiculous video gamer reasons. But and so a lot of lessons you take: gaming, football, huge fan bases, volatile, opinionated, and you just try to balance them out. And so again, rightly or wrongly, I started to engage and felt that was the best way to explain things to people at times.
I don't think you can remove the fact that you are a fan.
No.
And I think the fact that the ownership asked you, is this going to be impactful in your work? And, in the end, clearly it wasn't, because of the on-pitch success and everything else that went with it. Speaking of the success, that night in Madrid, the night in Qatar, the night we won the league after 30 long, really hard years as Liverpool fans, how do you rank them against each other? All very different, obviously, but they must be some of the best moments of your life. Yeah,
well, Madrid was amazing because we'd had the disappointment, obviously, of Kiev. And there was only going to be one result in Madrid. You could just feel it. We had arranged to get all of our fans together in the plaza. I think it was Dali Plaza there. And what an afternoon that was. Jamie Webster, obviously.
Yeah.
And look, those things are great. The local authorities like it because they know where all the fans are, and it keeps them in a controlled environment, and it allows them not to have to worry about trouble. Not that we would ever create trouble, but you could just feel the energy. And again, no disrespect to Spurs, but they came in. We probably outnumbered them 5 or 6 to 1 in Madrid. And they gave away a penalty in the first minute, and there was only going to be one result. And when eventually Divock put the bow around it, there was a sense of relief in that stadium. And then the party started. We were able to go back to the hotel. We went well into the night till 4 a.m. I think everybody went upstairs, just grabbed their bags because the planes were leaving at like 7 a.m. Because we needed to get back, go to Melwood, basically take a shower,
and then hit the parade.
And take the parade, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So obviously the night in Qatar we become world champions as well. The Premier League win was I mean, I was outside Anfield that day, fireworks going off. I shouldn't have been, but I was there. But at the time, when you look at those individual moments of success, does it all seem worth it? All the pain and suffering, especially the Premier League one. I mean, ideal world, we would have celebrated it in a different way. But did you feel like, oof, that's happened now? We've won the league.
I mean, look, Qatar was great, but it was a little surreal being out there and 2 tough games. You remember Monterrey and Flamengo, but having that gold badge, was great. And I was disappointed that the league said, well, you can't wear it on your shirts. And I remember calling Richard Masters and saying, we need to wear this on our shirts. And I think it was Wolves. He said, all right, put it on for 1 game. And it was the Wolves game. And we were able to have that on our shirts. And then I think 2 seasons later, the league said, because I think Chelsea wore it all season long. So, but, that was validation to me, that we were the best team in the world that season. And we had a badge to prove it, if you will. Other than that, it was, it's just different being a FIFA club championship in December. You've got a break. We had to do all kinds of weird things. You remember we played Aston Villa. But it was wonderful to get out there. I think the players thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a little bit of a dry run for the Qataris for the World Cup, and challenge for us. I think 11 days before we're playing, I get a call from organising committee saying, "Yeah, we've changed stadiums." And how is this going to work? I think it went to Education City. It's all a blur to me now. But
I think it was the Al Khalifa Stadium.
It was Al Khalifa, yeah. But I said, ticketing, the seats identical, and so we went through all of those logistics, and it all worked out very well in the end. Where are we going to get a drink for the fans and set up a fan park? But, what it was, which is what it turned to be, a little bit of an early dry run for the Qataris to figure out managing football fans coming in. What would that look like? Stadium operations, they certainly, their infrastructure wasn't done then. And then, for us, it was just that validation. And don't get me wrong, it was wonderful to get the win, have the trophy. But from the perspective of, did it compare with Champions League or Premier League? Not really, but it was great being there. And just, for me, my memory, Bobby scoring a late winner to make it happen, because I'm thinking extra time, it's just going to get, it was going well into the night. And then the one memory I have is I was in the receiving line, which was great for me. And Infantino was putting the medal thing on, and players are coming up, and I'm giving him a hug, and Infantino puts a medal on Millie, and the medal, the clasp had broken, drops on the floor, and Infantino just gets in this rhythm and gives Millie a new medal, and Millie bends over, grabs the medal, gives it to me, and sticking it around, and I have it. It's there. They clearly had more medals than they needed, but just one of those things that I can remember. I happened to be in the right place at the right time, I guess, and I have that memory, that medal framed up at home in California of that night.
Milner always assisting.
Millie there was great. He said, "Yeah, put this in your pocket." Yeah, it was great.
What a legend.
Yeah.
First impressions of Jurgen Klopp when you meet him, and you must have had a good few drinks with him after Madrid as well.
Yeah, well, it was chaos after Madrid, and yes and no. When we were all in the basement, I believe it was the Eurostar Hotel, the cup was being passed around. There was hundreds of us down there. It was very free-flowing, and when, I'm trying to think whether, I'm sure I had a beer with him at some point, but it was friends and family. A little bit of the media somehow got in there, and our partners and sponsors. So there was a couple hundred people in there, and it was very much an unbelievable party atmosphere that was relief a little bit, that finally, and from Jurgen's perspective, this is kind of what he promised us, and here it is. And then there was a realization about 4 a.m. we need to go and get our suitcases because the planes are going to be leaving soon to get back, because I obviously knew that the parade had all been planned and we got the route ready, and so we needed to get back. Yeah.
When you work with someone like him, because viewers at home will be itching to know what he's like to work with. I mean, I'd love to have a drink with him myself. You know, what is he like to work with as a person, both on and off the pitch, I guess?
Well, you know, it's obviously a tremendous motivator, I'll say of men, but, you know, motivator of people. He is psychologist, sociologist, a very smart individual in that his life is bigger than just football. A lot of football managers are incredibly myopic. Football is all they know. They played all their lives. They manage. They don't have that broader perspective of the world. And what you see with Jurgen, you see it in press conferences, you see it in intimate interviews, is that this is a man of the world as well, that not only understands the place of football, but the impact that it has on hundreds of millions of us around the world. And he takes that very seriously. But he calls it the most important of the least important things. And I think that's unusual at his level of management. And I think it's also a massively important tool in his arsenal to be able to motivate people. He understands people. He has tremendous empathy for what players sometimes go through. He's a hard ass. I mean, he's not going to make, I don't believe anyway, the wrong decisions out of sympathy or because he particularly likes a player, and if they're having a tough time, they're having a tough time. And as you've seen game after game, not afraid of making wholesale changes as and when they're needed. But great to be around. You know, he's, you know, you talk about having a beer with him. He always told me he just doesn't drink during the week, and very rarely, and maybe at home he does in Formby, but very rarely do you see him actually having a beer. You know, I think he's completely and utterly focused on the job at hand.
Totally. No, I love him. Yeah. I absolutely wish that he just sticks around forever, to be honest. Yeah. You mentioned earlier that you were crucial in bringing Reebok to Liverpool. Yeah. In the mid to late 90s, some amazing kits. Yes. You know, different material of kits as well. They were a lot baggier back then, but again, you had on maybe your way out, you had a role in bringing Nike into the club. Yes. As, I guess, a Liverpool fan and someone who's had a dealing with these brands, tell me your favourite kit that you remember. Oh. Because we have gone through the ages with Umbro in the 70s to Adidas, which was really famous in connection to just general wear in Liverpool with Wade Smith and places like that. But then there's the Reeboks, the Warriors, the Nikes. Yeah, I mean, you've got to go back, I think, to my Reebok days, and you call out a Wade Smith. One of the things we did at Reebok, and it was Reebok UK that were really the driving force with this. This was the moment, I think, for us that we at Reebok started to realize we could drive not only just kit sales, but lifestyle. Liverpool was the club to do it. The mid-90s was the time to do it. Liverpool in the mid-90s with the Wade Smiths and Chris Lee, who was there at the time, was instrumental in saying, what does this terrace culture look like? What is it? We were going to Europe a lot. We were bringing back gear from Italy and Spain and Portugal and Germany and you know, a ton of Adidas obviously at that time, or Adidas. And we had developed a little bit of a different strategy, like, well, let's not only sell red home shirts, but let's think about lifestyle. And let's really think about, first of all, the Liverpool mentality. Let's make it very Liverpudlian. And then secondly, you know, what are the different colours that haven't been used? And this is where Ecru emerged. And very unique. To this day, obviously, people still look back at that. And that's got to be, you know, I was in the store the other day and I was nearly going to buy one. It's not Reebok anymore. It's just a generic one, but in classic Ecru. And I just remember being at Reebok when the team here in Lancaster, Reebok UK, said, look at these colorways. And that became, and that period as well, albeit kind of Spice Boys period,
you know, the Robbie Fowlers and the Steve McManamans and Jason McAteers of that period.
Patrick Berger.
Obviously, and that's what you see, and the kind of the bagginess thing was as much of a trademark of that. The silhouettes were different than clearly they are today. But we were able to then start thinking about, and if you remember the twill training top with the black and ecru, the classic Liverpool badge, a little bit more detail than we have today. But we made it this, we said we can build lifestyle out of this and start putting multiple SKUs, stock keeping units, SKUs in there, much more than any other brand had done at that time. And so I think that ecru shirt, because of its uniqueness, distinctiveness, I mean, I don't think we were very successful in it when I think back, you know. But the ability for us to, I think, change the way people thought about football kits. You can point to that period, to Liverpool and Reebok and those early days of 96, 97, 98, going all the way through.
The ecru, I agree, was a truly iconic kit, which kind of defined the era. It didn't help that we wore cream suits in the final, which
Spice Boys,
which gave us the Spice Boys title. But I agree, the ecru shirt, I mean, it was the first shirt I owned. I was born in '94, and it's the first one I had. I don't have it anymore. I wish I still did. I don't know what happened to it, actually. The current squad, quite different to how you maybe left it in the back end of 2020. As Liverpool fans, how confident should we feel that success is around the corner again? I know, you know, we only won 2 trophies in 2022, but Liverpool fans are now expecting maybe more so than ever. So how confident are you that it's going to be a good year?
Well, look, it's still October. We're in every competition. And if you're Liverpool and you're in a competition, your belief is you can win it. I like to see a little bit more variation at the top of the table, which we're seeing right now. So it's not just us and Man City, for example. You've got Arsenal and Spurs, legitimate contenders. And what you have to like about that as a fan is these clubs are going to take points off each other. Very difficult to see a club getting 97, 98, 9,900 points this season. Points are already being dropped. And so I think it's going to be a more interesting season. I mean, for me, I'd be, as just purely a fan, disappointed now if we didn't finish top 4. There's clearly a team, actually more than a team, there's a squad now capable of challenging to get back into Champions League where we belong. That, as I well know, gives you a little bit better of a financial platform, gives you the opportunity to attract world-class players if we didn't already have that, because you're back in Champions League. But you know, it's going to be tough. You do your normal quote-unquote top 6, although Chelsea's struggling, but add Newcastle into that mix, right? And so
Brighton as well.
Pardon?
Brighton as well.
Yeah, well, there's teams right now that have proven they can take points off any other team, and that's always been the beauty of the Premier League. You know, in America we've got a expression in the NFL on any given Sunday. You know, and the NFL, like a lot of American sports, has this parity system called the draft. And the worse you are one season, the better players you get through the draft system out of college, and that gives parity. We're different in football in that, you know, you don't have that, and for better or worse, it's going to be the same 6 or 7 clubs. But I do like the fact now when I look at the league table that somebody isn't running away with it already here, and there's going to be some great games in our future here. You know, we've already played Chelsea away and Spurs away, obviously, and for different reasons, it's going to be fun having those 2 teams at Anfield. Sure,
absolutely. Speaking, you mentioned the Tottenham game there. What was your opinion on the VAR that we've now learned wasn't really up to scratch for that game in particular, and we're talking about the Luis Diaz disallowed goal? Yeah,
I mean, for me, you know, we have formed an official Liverpool supporters club in Santa Barbara where I live, and so it's great. You know, for us, that game would have been a 9:30 a.m. kickoff or whatever it happened to be, and you're a little bemused when you're 5,500 miles away and you're not getting the benefit of maybe a Sky Sports or TNT now commentary. You're getting NBC. No big deal, but it was difficult for anybody to understand what was going on. And of course, I'm like everybody, the naked eye, you go, well, the defender's back foot is a good 2-3 feet ahead of where DIAZ, with any part of his body that could score a goal, and it was clear to everybody. But we just didn't, it was confusing. And then, you know, your attention immediately after, well, okay, it's no goal. Now we're down to 10 men, which unfortunately had become a regular occurrence already this season. But I felt at 10 men we were still playing in there and were difficult to break down. And I still felt pretty optimistic that we could do something. Time it got to 9, it was a whole different story. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's pretty obvious that Darren England just thought, well, not obvious, they admitted that he thought a goal had been given and he was simply confirming it. For me, it was a disappointing breakdown of communication. Yeah. There are industries and businesses that have clear communications where sometimes your life is at stake, where you need to be very clear what you're communicating. And when you listen to the audio, it's a bit of a mess. Yeah,
it is. The derby next week at Anfield, looking forward to that. Everton have got a few wins on the board themselves now. Yeah. Is that going to be maybe a bit more of an important derby than ones in the past in terms of...
They're all important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, as difficult a time as Everton have, they come to Anfield and they're a different team than they would be going away to Aston Villa or something like that. So it's always a challenge. And you know, Jurgen says this every time, it's Everton. They've got something to prove. It's you and your brother in the household. It's a house divided. And so it's always blood and guts and thunderous tackles in the first 5 minutes. And Everton's showing life, you know, good win against Bournemouth. And so international break, a lot of our players are scattered to the wind. I don't know how many internationals Everton have. But you come back from that and you have a derby. The only disappointing thing for me is a 12:30 kickoff, and I don't get. And I'll say that, A, because I think it's tough. Those 12:30 games at Anfield, and I went to several during my period here, the energy's not there. Maybe the derby of that. And B, that's 4:30 a.m. where I live, that basically my alarm clock goes off at 3:30 and go get the coffee on and then sit and watch. It's those are hard mornings. And I say that because we've not been successful, albeit we were this last time out for the Wolves game, I think it was. That can ruin your day pretty much, and your day's already ruined for
whole weekend
by 6:15 a.m. on the West Coast. So I wish it wasn't 12:30. I don't know why Liverpool gets embroiled so many times in these 12:30 kickoffs. The old days, it used to be, let's go early so we can control the crowds. They don't get as much beer inside of them. That doesn't ring true anymore.
And we've had the most post-international break 12:30 kickoff since 2015.
Makes no sense, yeah. I mean
McAllister's playing against Peru on Wednesday at 1 a.m.
Well, the Wolves game, the last, it was only 3-4 weeks ago, was exactly that. So I'm sure Jurgen's not thrilled.
Just a quick one before I get into some questions that we had from the viewers. When you left Liverpool, it was during lockdown.
Yes.
How did lockdown maybe impact your work, and is there any stories maybe that you could give us of difficult times working with the players or making sure that everything was above board in that time?
The last game we played was March 12th against Atletico Madrid. Did not end well.
Was that the game myself?
Yeah. And obviously for all of the controversy, Madrid had been shut down, I think, the previous day. COVID was clearly becoming rampant. But we played the game. UEFA said you play the game, so we played the game. It did not end up well at all for us. And then, gosh, if I remember rightly, Mikel Arteta became the first...
he was, yeah, you're right.
Kind of well-known member of the football ecosystem to get COVID, and that was it then once we had that. And we had, Richard Masters had called me, the Premier League CEO, and said, we're seeing COVID coming and we're not optimistic we can get through the next few weeks without having to stop the league. And we were, if I recall, we were going to play Everton and then play Crystal Palace at Anfield. Play Everton at Goodison Park, Crystal Palace at Anfield. If we had beaten Everton and then we had beaten Crystal Palace, I think mathematically we'd won the league as early as that was in late March, because we were so far ahead. And the league had said, would you accept the Premier League trophy at Anfield if we can get there? And I said, of course, because the league, to its credit, was doing planning, worst case scenario planning here. But we never got there. So then we go into lockdown. As with everybody, we're all on our homes, and then we're cranking up our Zoom expertise, and the league, actually Microsoft Teams. And so then it became weekly, if not twice a week, Premier League meetings, which were emotional, depending on the objectives of any particular team. There was a initial conversation about null and void, and no surprise for teams that were precariously positioned near relegation. There was how we're going to get this back, and then a lot of conversation about the financial implications of the TV deals. And to the credit of the Premier League media teams, they were negotiating with not only our UK broadcasters, but the global broadcasters of, all right, with 9 games to go, I believe it was, what does it look like if we're able to play ultimately behind closed doors? And as you know, we did. It was bizarre, to say the least. I was at every game, and no crowds. You could hear every player. Taught me a lot about Virgil's booming voice and Jordan Henderson's play-by-play commentary.
Love it, son.
Yeah, well, I just never stopped. And so it was tough, and it was difficult, and it was emotional in some of these meetings, depending on who was doing what. We had, the kind of the furloughing situation that we did and then we didn't do, and we then had to, from our perspective, try to figure out how to keep this club running and pay people and be ready should we can get back going again and maintain that momentum. We were going to win the league, and unfortunately, as it turned out, we were never going to get to the position where people would be allowed back in again to watch. And so that night against Chelsea, Sky, to their credit, did a nice job of almost a made-for-TV event. For me, my abiding memory is being there with there was 3 people there: me, Ian Rush, and Kenny Dalglish.
Wow.
And they snuck us a glass of champagne. Not supposed to have that in the car. And we just toasted. And Kenny had presented Jordan with the trophy, but it all felt very hollow, And you and your mates who shouldn't have been outside the stadium were outside the stadium. But it all, to this day, still feels like we owe the fans a bus tour. Now, be a bit daft now, but we'd waited 30 years, and this is what happens, so. But it was all day and every day. You're doing 6 or 7 hours of Zoom, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams meetings. We were all obviously locked in our homes, but you, like a lot of companies around the world, figured out how to make everything work, keep everything going, pay everybody, and be ready, if you will, at the drop of a hat when things started to move. And then as we got closer to, all right, we're going to start playing behind closed doors, and for us that was away at Everton. Then what are the protocols? How do we keep the fans away? And how do we make this feel like real football? And so the television companies were involved. My old company EA offered up the FIFA soundtrack, if you recall, and so there was something there that sounded like a football match. But yeah, it was sad, and to this day, I wish that our fans had been there inside the stadium to celebrate that.
Well, that's all the questions from me. I did ask our viewers on the Kop TV for a couple of quick fire questions. This is a good one from Amira. They say, when will you come back to Liverpool? We miss you.
Here I am. We're actually here to do what we did whilst we was here, was support the people of Liverpool. So we're here to support Alderhay Children's Hospital on Thursday night, tomorrow night. in the cathedral in conjunction with the LFC Foundation. My wife Debbie has been supporting Alder Hey throughout the year from California as part of the committee putting this on. My mum was a nurse at Alder Hey post-World War II, and we, through the Peter Moore Foundation, have funded treatment rooms there, and more recently a mental health room. And so Alder Hey, which is a very important part of this community, we will be doing that tomorrow night. And then Clatterbridge Cancer on Friday. Again, Debbie's been a major part of helping them think through what needs to happen to raise money for this magnificent new hospital we have here in Liverpool. So that's primarily why we came back, is to continue to give back to a city that's given me so much.
Yeah. Mike says, what was the greatest feeling you had whilst being CEO of Liverpool?
I think, and it may not be the answer he thinks it will be, but being able to travel around the world and be in some seedy pubs in some strange cities and be sat there like this with 50 or 60 fans. And interestingly, in the United States, which obviously is my home, being in Austin, Texas, New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, in all of these cities, and listening to fellow Americans talk about their love for the football club with deep passion, deep understanding, and being able to chat with people that sound and are completely American, but to talk about Istanbul in 2005 and the Dalglish Rush eras, and you know, it's still a little bizarre to me, you know, and I'm always not questioning, but I meet people and I go, how did you fall in love with Liverpool? You know, and everybody's got a story. And when you live here, you take it for granted, it's your club. But it's amazing, you hear the stories of people, well, I turned the television on one day 20 years ago and there's this strange game in Istanbul, Turkey, and this team in red are 3-0 down, and I kept watching, and it was the most amazing comeback. And so these kind of origin stories always amaze me.
One from Sharnock, who says, who is/was your favourite Liverpool player over the time you were CEO?
Oh, over the time? Yeah, I'm not going to... Yeah, there's no good answer to that.
Too many?
Way too many. I mean, it's a team game. And you know what? You know, and I was blessed to be there when obviously it was Mo, Bobby and Sadio up front, you know, and firing on all cylinders. But yeah, no, it's that team, which almost picked itself at times, you know, was, if you were a Liverpool fan and you got to see that live, then you were blessed to see those three flying at defenses. Bobby hanging back a little bit with those little flicks, but yeah, no, I had a favorite team, not a favorite player.
Yeah, I mean, from the fans' perspective, there was no bad guys, there's no bad eggs. It seemed like all just nice.
Well, that's
people,
a little bit, you know, the credit. That's deliberate in that when you pick players at Liverpool, you pick players not only based on their skill and their ability to contribute, but you look at the types of players like a James Milner and a Jordan Henderson. These are good, solid players that deliver more than on the pitch. But you know, everybody would always describe Millie, for example, as the shop steward. You know, just organize things.
Yeah.
And you look at that, and you know, everybody. Interestingly, that's been going on for 30 odd years. I come back and always smile when I look at the pundits in studio, go, it's pretty much ex-Liverpool players. Articulate, knowledgeable, gregarious, thoughtful, good leaders, you know, the Graham Souness's, for example. And that's indicative of the quality of human being that has put a red shirt on over the decades.
Listen, those are all the questions. Peter, I just want to say thank you for being the CEO of Liverpool Football Club. As a fan, the success that you oversaw, I'll never forget. So
yeah,
thank
well,
you so much.
I can take credit for a few things. Scoring goals, making saves, not that. I was very fortunate to be there at that moment in time where everything was clicking, and to be able to contribute off the pitch to help what Jurgen was doing brilliantly on the pitch.
Yeah. Well, guys, that's it. Peter Moore, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Remember to like the video, comment with your thoughts down below, and subscribe to the channel. Peter, you'll never walk alone.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for watching this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it.
Please, guys, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the Kop TV.
The voice of football's most famous stand.